Hey everyone, welcome back to the Trendcrusher podcast. I'm Peter K. This episode features no music but a long, extensive chat with filmmaker Rana Ghose. Over the past 15 years, Rana has worn many hats: show promoter, talent management agency owner. He's even booked shows for Indian bands around the world. I met him at an event a couple of months ago and we finally got time to do this chat. I tried to cover his entire journey all the way from his childhood. Really enjoyed this one and I hope you also do listening to it. And if you do enjoy listening to these kind of episodes, let me know via trendcrusher@gmail.com or via my social media profiles. I'd love to do more such chats with musicians, depending on the feedback to this episode. So hit me up. Here's my chat with Rana Ghose. Hi Rana, welcome to the podcast.
What's up? How you doing?
Good man. I'm glad, we kind of managed to get time in both our schedules to make this happen. And honestly, this has been a long, long time coming when I think about it.
Mm,
And when I was thinking about it, right, like it was very coincidental that I think this happened within like weeks or a month apart, where I had this colleague of mine who was listening to, and I'm blanking out, sorry, it's been a long day, but
mm.
the Charanjit Singh record.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, how do you kind of know of this artist? And he's like, oh, I just came across it. And I was like, okay, if you like his music, go watch this documentary.
Yeah.
And I recommend the documentary that you made on Charanjit Singh. So he found it on YouTube, was watching it. The
Mm,
next day he came in and he was like, dude, what the hell? And then he went to like certain sections of the video and I could see, and if I'm like not wrong, he's like in his mid 20s, right?
Who?
So my colleague.
Oh
So
shit.
yeah, so
Oh.
so the fact that like over a decade after you've kind of put out this documentary, right? Someone's
Uh,
discovering it, getting their mind blown.
wait,
Uh,
was he in the film? Was he in a frame or something? Is that what you're saying?
No, no. So
No.
I made him
Oh, okay,
watch
okay,
it.
okay.
I made him
Okay,
watch it
okay.
at office, and I told him like, check it out. This is something cool. Since you're into the music, I think you'll kind of enjoy it. And he's one of
Mm,
those guys who's like an editor, right? So he
mm,
understands this kind of stuff. He wants to watch it, gets into everything, right?
mm.
And it's strange that like the discovery point with him was watching or listening to 10 ragas to a disco beat on YouTube. And then he now gets into the thing. And fast forward a couple of weeks later, I see that you're in Bombay.
Mm.
So we end up connecting again.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of reminded you that we had actually met about 13 years ago when you were
Mm.
actually, if I'm not mistaken, and again, I am a little fuzzy on the timeline, but I think you had the documentary ready on Charanjit Singh. You had sent me a screener,
Yeah.
and you were like, "Hey, I want to do kind of screenings around it." And
Yeah.
look how
Well,
that
yeah.
kind of worked out, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually heading out to Europe like in a matter of days to do a bunch of screenings of those films and others. But I think maybe you were at NH7 and maybe I came to talk about MC Cash, maybe the
Yeah, that
Charanjit
also.
thing, maybe even having Charanjit perform at like a weekender. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
at that point I was putting it out there. I was just like seeing anybody. So I'm not to suggest that you're like anybody. But you know what I mean? Like I was really just
yeah,
trying to
yeah. That
so
was the thing, right? For me, and this is again because it was 2012, 13, right? MC Cash documentary was truly eye-opening. I mean, this is
mm,
way before rap and hip hop, desi hip hop kind of really blew up.
it's
And
true.
also just
Yeah.
kind of understanding the stark reality that he was kind of making music in and stuff like that. So I think Taken Blood is easily, when I look back, one of like those things which is like, especially considering like I live in Mumbai, Bombay, an urban population, just kind of you take for granted certain things, right? And especially like
Mm,
expression, music, and things like
yeah.
that, and seeing how he was doing that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's going back, I don't know, 13 years, which is really
Mm.
while it seems like a long time, it also seems like just a few weeks ago for me. I don't know how you look back at those times.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, it's interesting you ask that question right now because the past 4 to 5 days I've been going back into all of these hard drives that are just next to me and on and on and just remastering these films, the two Charanjit films, the MC Cash film, the short on Suryakanta's Lifafa, current project I'm working on, and have just been looking at a lot of footage from 13 years ago, actually. And I remember it very well. It doesn't seem that long ago. I don't know what's up with that. I don't know if it's like as we get older, the distances between moments becomes less and something about the speeding up of time. I don't know. But yeah, it seems like yesterday. It's a cliche, but it's true. Yeah.
Let's, I mean, I know we kind of fast forwarded quite a bit. So let's
Mm.
go all the way back to like the early bit, right? I know you've
Mm.
been involved in film. I know you grew up in Canada. Um, was music or always something that you were interested in? Like, what's your early memories, or early thing about really your early relationship with music?
Oh wow. So I grew up in really rural Canada. Really like dirt road, middle of nowhere, rural Canada. My father was an engineer working in the mining sector. So I didn't grow up with a lot of peers. Put it to you like that. I kind of read a lot. There are these books that I'm looking at right now because I'm home in Halifax. Like I'm literally in this condo where I grew up. When I come back to Halifax, I'm often here. None of my like father's passed away. My mother is living in a care facility happily. When I'm here in Canada, I'm here. I'm this is my childhood home essentially. A bit weird, also very amazing. Anyway, opposite me are these Britannica Book of the Years, they're called, like these compendiums that Britannica would put out every year. And they had a popular music section. And I remember being 7 or 8 and looking at this one of these, I think the 1973 Book of the Year, maybe 74, and looking through it and coming across a photograph of Isaac Hayes. I don't know if you know who Isaac Hayes is. He put out an album called Hot Buttered Soul in 1972. Um, And this picture of him it's essentially the inside of an album he did called Black Moses, where he's like this. His hands are outstretched, and he's got this thick gold chain. And the photograph just stuck with me. I was like, who is this? I then like, started going through each of these books and making this list of artists. I don't know, like just I was trying to list every musician that I could find. It was just some exercise in like I don't know. I was maybe just a 8-year old, 9-year old who was bored but somehow these images and this word exegesis, the whoever wrote this piece described Hayes's version of by the time I get to Phoenix as an 18-minute exegesis. And I didn't know what that word meant, but I thought it was the coolest word.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
some weird exercise in like
I still don't know what it means.
yeah, exegesis. It's kind of like a prolonged kind of like submission to a higher power musically. It varies depending if it's like a vocal, like a monologue or a song. Anyway, but it's an incredible piece of music. Regardless, I started making this list, and as the years go on, between I don't know, for the next between the ages of like 7, 8, 9, I had this list, and then and it became a thing in my life. And I remember going to visit Toronto. We had an uncle in Toronto, and going to a big record store and losing my mind and like I was just writing out everything. And then at some point, I lost that thing. But I remember that very clearly as that's kind of perhaps bookish, but also I think I've always been interested in these lineages of music and the music, of course, as like a sonic reference and a cue, but it's the imagined legacy and lineage of that music and how these forms came to be that I think always really, for whatever reason, interested me. And I think it started with that. Um, so I guess I was 14. We moved to where I am now in Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada. And I was, yeah, 14. And Halifax had, and I believe still does, had a college radio station, mainstay of independent music in North America. historically in terms of distribution and radio. It's a bit of a dated concept now, but then um, and then they had a hip hop show, and at that time I just discovered hip hop. I was deeply into like Public Enemy and LL Cool J and Cool Modi and Big Daddy Kane, and the hip hop show was on, and the host was like, "Hey, so we have tickets for Run DMC, who's coming to Halifax," which is unusual, but they were. And if he kind of said, if there's anybody out there who knows who produced Raising Hell, call. And I knew because I'm a geek, and it was Russell Simmons, and so I called this number, and I said, "How's Russell Simmons?" Like, "Oh my God, you won!" So I go there to pick up these tickets, and I don't think the college radio staff were expecting this really awkward 14-year-old kid with like tape on his glasses. Just but they kind of were like, okay. And so they gave me the tickets. And as I was leaving, they're like, hey, we if you ever want to volunteer here, we always have a need for people. So think about it. So yeah, man, for the next like 3 years over high school, I was there every weekend alphabetizing the record stacks. And they also were like, there's a tape deck here, so just go nuts, if you want to tape any of this music. And that was my musical education. I literally spent 3 years going through that archive of I don't know how many thousands of records and just digging, and finding things. And I certainly think that formed a huge part of my own musical, I don't know, upbringing, tastes. But again, also just the kind of more cataloging, storytelling aspect of who these people were, because it's a record library, and so you'll have not one record by Husker Du, you'll have a discography, you know? So you can really kind of pull it apart a bit. So yeah, I think from a young age, I wasn't necessarily like I grew up in a musical household or like my father appreciated music, Bengali music, my parents both, Rabindra Sangeet and things like that. They are Bengali. Um, but so it was always in the house, to be sure. And there was like Western music, as it were, as so to speak. There was like the Bee Gees and ABBA, still things that my father I think appreciated pop music and classical. But yeah, I think honestly, it was more this kind of more I don't know, research um endeavor. I just always found these stories of these people fascinating. I don't really think that's changed. To be honest with you.
I mean, I was
Um,
just gonna say that, right? Like, I feel like I'm actually talking to the 14-year-old you, or like it's still the kind of same thing because it's weird.
yeah,
We've never talked about this, even though
yeah,
we spent like a few hours a couple of months ago, right? I actually have my
yeah.
foundations in college radio in Canada also. So
Oh,
I think I've spoken about this on the podcast. I can't remember, but I went
okay.
to University of Toronto in Scarborough, of all places.
Oh,
Uh,
amazing.
I mean, it's now has a different kind of notoriety, and I think
I
it
love
did also.
Scarborough. Is
Yeah,
it
but
CKUT? Is that the one in Toronto? No.
no, that's downtown campus.
Okay, gotcha. Mm.
They had so that's an actual FM station, right? I don't know
Yeah.
if it still is, but in the Scarborough campus, they had Fusion Radio, which was just online radio.
Okay.
And I remember as one of the student services and student activities, you're introduced to what all is there on campus. And I was very fascinated with radio.
Mm.
And the fact that it was volunteer, it was student run, blew my mind. I was like, what? I have a chance to do it. And I still
Yeah.
remember you had to like just put together to an 18-year-old, which was, I think, the first time I'd ever done it, especially coming
Mm.
from like India and the Middle East, where I had to like
Mm.
write a note about my show.
Yeah.
And I had been for the last 2, 3 years just going like head first. That's the only way I can kind of describe it into like
Mm. Yeah.
extreme metal and metal. So I was like,
Nice.
this is going
Mm.
to be called, and I don't think I've ever said this name, but it was called Subterranean Rant. Don't ask me why, because I think it sounded cool to an 18-year-old, right?
Right. Right.
But because they kind of agreed to have me do a show, and there was one more person doing a metal show, so
Mm.
it was cool that he kind of showed me around. And what I think helped is back then, and I'm talking about 2004 and 5, yeah, 2000, actually, yeah, all the way up to 6, because he had built a network. of reaching out to all the metal labels and metal magazines and everyone, right?
Mm.
Like 3 months before these albums came out, we would have like
Yeah.
copies of them and you had
Yeah.
access to that. And then
Yeah.
you'd have like singles, just one song
Hmm.
on a CD come in.
Hmm.
And a
Hmm.
lot of times, like they would just send us like t-shirts and,
Yeah. Stickers. Posters.
stickers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And like the guy was really cool. Shout out to him, Andrew. He would just be
Yeah.
like, hey, there's an extra copy of the CD. Keep it. And
That's
I was
cool.
like, what the
Yeah.
fuck? Or he's like, hey, if you want to check out any of the music, like just feel free, but bring it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
No,
was
it's
just like,
true. It's yeah. Yeah.
and then the fact is like when you go from places where you have very little access to a lot of this music to now
Mhm.
suddenly it at your fingertips. I totally relate to you like spending all that time kind of going
Yeah.
in. And yeah, I mean, one
Mm.
of the people I actually did an interview with was Sam Dunn, who did Metal Headbangers Journey. So
Okay.
he made that documentary, and I was like fascinated. I was like, wow, there's someone who's an anthropologist who's like gone
Yeah.
to all these music festivals and stuff like that. And I mean,
Yeah.
I was again, I'm not still that much of an avid movie or a documentary watcher, but that was just fascinating, right? Like to think that
Mm.
someone does that. Uh, at which point did your whole thing about music and filmmaking kind of intersect? Like, was that
Mm.
something out of choice or you just kind of stumbled upon it? I'm very curious.
Um. So. Okay. So yeah, I'll just pick up from where I left off because it does answer your question. I never really took it seriously, I think. I just knew that I loved music and I loved these stories. But I intellectually, what really got me as a younger person was economics. Um, when I took a high school course in economics in my last year, it just was like, oh, this is the study of like everything. And it just made total sense to me. And I could understand why people were struggling in my class with economics. I just found it like such an amazing toolkit and series of suggestions of how to look at the world around you. And so when I began my undergraduate degree, I did a Bachelor of Commerce, but I majored, as they say, in economics and did well and was invited to pursue a graduate degree in economics, but I wanted to not do that. So I did do a master's degree in economics later. So all throughout this, music was just like something I would listen to at that point. But there was no part of me that considered a professional career arc with anything related to the music at all. I just remained a very committed fan of music. Um and it was ironically through my research in economics that I picked up a video camera. I got a grant after my graduate degree to conduct some field research in India. Um my graduate research is on it was microeconomics, so it's a lot of math and modeling, calculus, etc. Um and it was all data driven. But I kind of had this point after submitting my master's thesis that like I hadn't set foot in any environment where the data came from. So I was looking at farmer decision making processes in India around seeds and GM seeds in particular, and this particular theoretical variety of seed called Terminator gene use restrictive technology, where it's like if you plant the seed, the progeny of the seed is sterile. So it's kind of like a genetic patent. You can't like replant it. You have to buy it again, you know? Anyway, this is fascinating to me. So it was a modeling exercise on if a farmer decides to either save or buy a seed. But I didn't spend any time in like a field. So I got a grant to do some research, and I had a mentor, and the mentor suggested getting a video camera. So I was in Jharkhand in this village for months, and I had a video camera. And the same year, I got my hands on a still camera after many years. That same period of my life as a young, like, adolescent, I had access to a black and white, like a camera. My father also was a hobby photographer and a filmmaker, I should say. Well, not filmmaker. He had a Super 8 film camera, and he would, document us growing up, and we would watch those reels once a year. It just in the back of my mind, it was always there, like that thing. But again, I never thought about ever, using a camera professionally in any capacity, which is something I'd like to do. Printing in a dark room, I still do. Well, sadly, I haven't done it in a long time. I haven't had access to a dark room, but certainly love it. Anyway, so yeah, over the course of the tenure of doing this, of being this grant awardee, I had a video camera and a still camera, and I kind of went off. I I don't know what happened. I was just shooting everything, and I think a lot of it was the fact that I started off shooting stills after a long time. Also, at the time, film was like 25 rupees a roll in India. It was just like, oh my God. Like, so I was just shooting film, a lot of film. And you could process film in India also very cheaply. Anyway, so taking a lot of photographs and liking these photographs, and then around the same time starting to shoot video, but clearly framing these video frames like I was shooting a photograph with the added insanity of having a microphone. And I think that's what kind of did it for me. It's like, oh my God, these are like, it's such a silly thing to say. These are moving images with a microphone. But I think it was only when I realized that you could use a computer, which at the time was like a Pentium 3, you know, to edit video, which in my case is on Adobe Premiere 6.5, that my mind was just torn open. I just like, what the hell? This is crazy. And so I made a film about my research at the end of and I showed it to like, people who gave me this grant at the end of it. And they they were just like, how did, what? And they didn't like, this is the early days of like nonlinear digital video editing, I suppose, you know? So I think that was still a novelty that somebody who had no training formally could just make a film. And I make a film, I mean, I cut something, I had a voiceover. It was the first thing I ever did. But they hired me as a consultant for the next 9 years to document all of their work all over the world. Like, because I was an economist by training, but I could shoot and cut video and still tell stories. And so they were just like, can we just like send you and can you do this and that? And that's where I learned. I think that's where I learned. I lived out of a suitcase for the better part of like 5 years, based in Delhi mostly. They had an office in Jorbag and Delhi. And yeah, I just shot all over Africa and Asia. Um, and then, I was doing that for a while, and it's quite lucrative as a consultant in those sectors. So I started having some weird, again, but I saw a lot of really weird things in that. I don't know. But I was like, I don't know if am I really now going to be like a videographer? Is that what's going to happen? And I wasn't entirely convinced, and so I went back to do a PhD. But it was actually the PhD, and over the course of doing that, I was based in Bombay, and my research was in Vidarbha, in the interior of Maharashtra, that I met some people in Bombay who changed my life. And I've told them as such, so I can say I ended up meeting a performance artist named Nikhil Chopra, much younger Nikhil Chopra at that time. Um, and yeah, and then he ended up hooking me up with his costume designer. We fell in love. We were together for years, and my whole circle of friends was like these wildly creative people in Bombay. And I never saw or knew, coming from a small town, rural Canada, even Halifax is a small city. It's like 300,000 people. I never really grew up with creative people around me who professionally were creative, I should say, like took it seriously and made money and a living from it. I didn't know you could do that. This is late in life, really. I would have been in my like mid to late 30s at that time. Pretty convinced I was going to become like a biotech trade specialist. Um, but then I saw this other way of doing things. And I think around that time, I was like trying a few things. So the first thing was I went to Japan. My parents went to Japan on a holiday to see a cousin, and at that time, AirAsia had just opened up. They were flying out of Colombo, and I was in Colombo on assignment. I was still doing this consultancy stuff on the side to pay the bills, and so I found a cheap flight to Japan. And there's this artist who I don't know if you're familiar with a band called Deerhoof, from the Bay Area, the U.S.
Not
Deerhoof.
really.
Yeah, they have an album called Milkman. Anyway, the cover of Deerhoof is this really bizarre image of this like I guess I could say cartoon character illustration. And it's by this Japanese artist Ken Kagami. And so I just cold emailed the gallery that represented him. It's like, hey, I love your work. I'd love to talk to you on camera. And because I had my camera, 'cause I think I came from an assignment, so I had my gear. And he didn't speak English, but his gallerist did. And so I came and I shot, and it's still there on YouTube. It's like I think the first thing I ever put on YouTube, maybe. I don't know. Um, but I, I want I was like, I don't know if am I really now going to be like a videographer? Is that what's going to happen? And I wasn't entirely convinced, and so I went back to do a PhD. But it was actually the PhD, and over the course of doing that, I was based in Bombay, and I met And then I was like, wow. And then I ended up going to Canada and I went and I saw Deerhoof in concert and I totally scanned my it was a sold out show, but I had my camera and I just kind of went to the to the to the ticket counter saying, hey, I'm here to pick up my press pass. And they're like, oh, okay. And they gave me an all access pass. I ended up shooting the band and so I was kind of trying these things, like but I was still very much like in the middle of this other major project, I guess you could call it. You could call it PhD project. Um, but I think things came to a head when, again, Bombay. This is like in 2008, and I was driving in a car, in a cab, probably from like somewhere in South Bombay to Bandra, and I was crossing the Mahim Creek, and I saw those huge hoardings, which are still there. When it opens up and you come into
Yeah, yeah.
Bandra, and there are all those hoardings, right? And it was like IPL cricket, and I saw on the bottom right Sony. And so I was just like Sony. And so I looked into it because they had secured the broadcast rights. I guess this is a while ago. I'm assuming this is my calculus in my mind. And so I think I got home and I Googled like how much does Sony pay for IPL broadcast or something. And I saw some crazy number. And I was like, holy shit. And I think it was like, wow, there's so much interest in um, the scalability of popular culture in India in a media context. That was my initial assessment. And I was like, interesting. I wonder if I can bring a band to India. So at the time, I was really into this compilation called the Nuggets compilation. These are all this like, a bunch of garage rock bands from the States in the 60s, late 60s. And and then I came across a band called the Black Lips, which to me were like contemporary Nuggets. They were like it was like garage rock, but it was from the
Holy
early
shit.
mid
Are
2000s.
you gonna tell me the story I think you're gonna tell me?
I don't know. So basically, I was really into the Black Lips, and they were outrageous. I mean, I was really into the music, but I also was just like, who are these guys? You guys are nuts. And so they had a blog, and so I messaged the blog saying, "Hey, do you guys want to come to India?" And I didn't, I was like, I don't know. And in like 2 hours, Jared, the bassist, writes back, and he's like, "Yeah, let's go." Like he was stoked. I was like, "Oh my God." And so I was like, wow. And so for the next year, I was like just putting it out there. Like, I wonder how to do this. I started like trying to raise funds. And then I met Sahil. My friend Palash Krishna Mehrotra was writing a book called The Butterfly Generation. He had spoken to Sahil for the book, Demon Stealer.
Hmm.
And so Sahil, and then he's like, you should talk to him. So I talked to Sahil, and he's like, well, I don't know. Yeah, I showed him these videos. I think it was early days of Vice also, and VBS.TV was what it was called at the time, online video. And they had this video of the Black Lips in Tijuana, and it was just ridiculous. They're like vomiting, and there's this woman master. It's just craziness. Like the it's also Vice. Anyway, so I showed it to Sahil. He was kind of like, "Oh, okay," but he says you should meet this guy. His name is Vijay Nair. He might get it. And so I go to Jogeshwari, I don't remember, somewhere up north.
I know where it is. Goregaon,
Mm,
yeah.
it's a Goragal, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember. Anyway, and it was like him and four dudes and this like room that had four computers, and that was Babelfish, I think. And I showed them these outrageously offensive videos. Well, I don't know for these videos of the Black Lips, and like, yeah, so I really want to bring you to India. What do you think? And he's like, hmm. And I was like. I mean, to be fair, a lot of this was informed by my PhD in markets and regulation in India and deregulation in particular and new consequences of different kinds of things that could happen in that context. Because I was looking at regulation in my PhD and GMOs. Like I was looking at BT cotton and agrarian suicide and all this IP stuff. So anyway, I did that and he was like, okay. And then over the next few months, it happened. They basically I think the band paid for their travel, but I helped broker bookings in Bombay, Delhi, Chennai, Calcutta, Pune. Yeah. Um, yeah. And basically because they were signed to Vice as a record label at that time, I got paid. I got, I got paid to shoot. Hello. And I had that, at the time I had a 3CCD like Canon XHA1. And so me and this guy Rob from Vice, who's a producer, were like shooting this tour. And yeah, I don't know I don't know if you are, you kind of reacted when I mentioned the Black Lips at that time. So maybe you know a bit about the story. maybe when I met you, I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, well, they came and they did a number of shows, and it was really stunted and a bit odd for them because I think the audience at the time, and it was like college festivals and like Turquoise Cottage in Delhi and 2008 India. Um, I think it, yeah, and I can imagine that the crowd basically were like, these guys can't even play their instrument. Like who are these idiots? What is this shit? Um, you know. And I think like after a certain point, they were just like, and I can sense also they were like they were also holding back, they were kind of like reading the room. They were a lot younger. So I think they were just like certainly down for whatever. Um, but maybe didn't know exactly what they were getting into. I don't think any of us did, to be honest with you. Anyway, so by the time they get to Chennai, yeah, they decided to do like a Black Lip show. And you know, uh well, um I think I think Cole pulled down his pants and started playing guitar with himself. And
Yeah.
I think Jared and then Cole started to make out, and then Jared jumped into the crowd. And all this is happening, the crowd is going apeshit, like, and it's a great show. It's like, actually. And then the show ends and everybody's really stoked and euphoric and then I think it becomes apparent that Hero Honda, who are the sponsors of that particular event at some auditorium in Chennai. I can't remember the name of it. Were upset, shall we say? And then I got a call from Vijay, and he was really upset. And I think the suggestion was that I deliberately was aiming to sabotage, and I was not, of course, but um, it suddenly came to a bit of a head, and I thought, hey, okay, I don't think it's wise for us to stay in the city. Um, if someone were to get really upset, they could suggest the police should, check out who are these. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to deal with this shit. I have a role to play. I wasn't really tour managing. I wasn't. This guy Nick Hill was. I don't know what happened to that guy. Nick Hill. I forget his last name. Um, he worked with Vijay at the time.
Hmm.
But I still felt like this was kind of like something that I initiated. So I have to ensure their safety to the extent that I can. And so, yeah, I think I booked two cars and we drove to Bangalore all night and got out of there. Yeah. And then and some NH7 guys came. I don't know who it was. Maybe you know who they are. Two dudes came and it was weird. They confiscated their passports, you know. They were angry. They were really angry. I think they lost like 10 lakhs, maybe more, maybe 16 lakhs. I don't know. Um, they were upset. So they took a bit of a heavy-handed approach, which didn't sit well with any of us. And so we got our passport, like got their passports back, and they flew the next day. Anyway, which is all to say that I shot the whole thing, and that was my first crash course in like filmmaking outside of like this kind of as a consultant, and really telling a story that I kind of, well, I'll say was like instrumental in making happen. I think that's accurate. Like I had this idea, I thought it'd be great to make a film about it. It happened that way, and yeah. And I got paid. So I suddenly was like, oh, I can also, this is a thing. Like this isn't so
Yeah.
crazy. This can happen. So yeah. And that was like towards the end of my PhD. So then I wrote that, I submitted my PhD. I did the whole thing in 4 years, whatever. I was like committed to it. Finished it, and then yeah. And ended up, yeah, that's what. And then I had some final interviews to do in Delhi at the Department of Biotechnology. And so and then I was gonna write, and I found this Barsati in South Delhi in GK2 for like 8,000 a month, and it was gorgeous. And I was like, oh my God. So I just took it, you know, initially without any intention of like sticking around for very long. It was just like, oh, I'll sign a year lease and it'd be nice. I've finished my PhD. I can hang out in India for a bit, and so yeah. And that was then me in Delhi in 2010, September, October, reconnecting with kernels of friendships that had been. I mean, I've known this guy Palash for at that point 8 years, and so he was in Delhi. But through Palash, I just kind of met a whole bunch of other people, really, many of whom are still friends, very close friends to this day. And one of those guys, pardon me, the gentleman named Samrat B. Bharadwaj, goes by
Yeah,
Audio Pervert.
audio
Used to be in a
pervert.
band called Teddy Boy Kill with Ashraf Faruqi. And Samrat and I were hanging out a lot. And Samrat, similar, both kind of interested in stories of music. Again, Samrat was just finishing a book that he did with Ritmika, Music Gets Me High, Ritmika, who
Yeah.
called Hub, and it was like this soft cover compendium on Indian electronic music at that time, pretty ahead of its time. 2010 it came out. I think it was bankrolled by the Goethe Institute, or I'm not sure. But anyway, it was like this book, and in this book was an essay on Charanjit Singh. And he was just wrapping it up. So I was hanging out with Samrat, and we would do this to each other. We would just play each other music and be like, "Yo, check this." Fellow music geek. Well, I don't want to. I'm not suggesting he's a music geek in a derogatory word, but we certainly would like to outdo each other or attempt. You know what I mean? When you have a friend like that, we're just like, "Yo, check this out." So Samrat was that guy, and still is. Anyway, so he played me this record. Didn't say what it was. He was like, "Yo, check this out." Plays me Tanner August to Disco Beat, and I'm listening. I'm like, okay, like it's like that's like okay. I haven't heard at that point anything like that. Had not heard anything like it. And then towards the end of like I think it was Vera, the first track, he's like, "Yeah, I have his number," because he had was finishing this book, and so but he hadn't contacted him. Some rods can be like that sometimes. He just he had his number but didn't. So funny story. This now. So then 2 weeks after that, some rat's like, "Yo, I'm going to this music conference in Bombay called Unconference. Maybe you were there." This is in like uh Siddhivinayak. There's like that area. What's that area called? P something. What the hell is it called in
Prabha
Bombay?
Devi. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Prabhadevi. There's like a big auditorium there. I forget what it's called. And so OML, again, early stage OML 2010, put on this conference called the Unconference. And it was like a music conference. And it was cool. There were like talks, and I remember this one really switched on dude in the audience who was asking hyper specific questions about like distribution. I didn't know who he was. That was Duelist. That was a young Sahed who just came back from the States. And anyway, I called him. And I suggested Samrat we should go meet him. You should give him a copy of the book. And he's like, "Yeah, okay." So I called him, we meet. And that first film that I don't know which one your friend saw. This was 2010 one. It was just literally me, just rolling camera like from the hip as like I meet this guy. Like, I cut that on the train back to Delhi on the Rajdhani, put it up. But that's the first time we met. And I think after that, finally to answer your question, a roundabout way, I think that was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make a film about this guy. But to make that film, he has to perform live because that's the film I want to make. How am I going to make him perform live? Or how will I arrange for situations where he can perform live? And just pure pragmatism is like, well, I guess I have to book him. So I did. And that's what happened. And I think out of that came an agency called Reproduce. Because when I was doing that, I mean, it's a remarkable story. And so, yeah, very quickly he was like playing 10,000 capacity crowds in Europe and, things like MoMA, PS1 in the US. And I was suddenly interfacing with like a music industry. Um, and was always answering this question, so what's happening in India right now musically, you know? And this is me in Delhi, hanging out with people like Samrat, but also having just met a guy named Surya Kansani. And yeah, I kind of finding myself in the middle of what I felt was really interesting music. And so I decided to start an agency because I felt like, well, if people don't know, maybe I can play a role to like present music that I find interesting that's from this part of the world that I don't think people would necessarily expect. Like on that roster was, yeah, there was like Samrat was on it. Heems was on it for a while, Himanshu for his India stuff, Charanjit, of course, Peter Cat, Lifafa, Jamblu. Um, yeah. So I think it started with that same desire of like, who is this man? What is this crazy record? How did this happen? but then wanting to visually tell it in a compelling way with some sort of a narrative arc, which would be him performing the music live at the age of 72. So it was really desire to tell a story. And I don't, yeah, but it was a conscious decision. I think after towards the end of the PhD when I submitted, um, I kind of already knew that I didn't think I was going to pursue a full-time career in academics. I thought it was a disservice to like my, um, whatever capacity I may have to like, um, interface with humans. Sounds a bit silly. Like, to do something that actually, um, finds people, maybe as a mirror of my desire to not, you know, be alone, whatever human condition aspect, the dynamic I was grappling with, but kind of feeling like academics was too narrow a funnel, so to speak. And I didn't feel that was the best use of my time. But I realized that, well, I seem to have the capacity to work with cameras and edit the footage that comes out of them. So,
Um,
yeah, I kind of wanted to jump in. I was like, well, now or never, and if I don't do it now,
yeah.
so yeah,
Wow, that's such a fascinating journey. I mean, like, I didn't know, or I probably forgot because it's been that many years, the whole Black Lips story. But
yeah,
I very, very well remember that incident because this was towards the end of the message board era in India.
yeah.
So
RSJ
that kind
formerly.
of, yeah,
Mm,
RSJ and GigPad, I think GigPad had
mm.
died by then, and that kind of blew up. And in 2008, I was living in the Middle East.
Okay.
Uh, Vice did a documentary, Heavy Metal in Baghdad,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
which is fucking amazing. I
It
mean,
was
like
cool, right?
even when I watch it now or see clips, I just can't believe they fucking did that stuff.
Iraq,
Uh,
right? I think it was in Iraq.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it was
and it
anyway,
was
him.
crazy. But
Yeah.
even like this was also the time I feel that like while you're talking about it, I'm remembering this is when people actually started getting one of those point and shoot cameras. It was far more
Yeah.
portable.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I was part of a website called Indian Rock MP3, which kind of like documented. It was a blog, which
Yeah.
became a website.
I know that
So you had a
website.
lot of people like
Oh yeah.
contributing. So there was that whole thing of citizen journalism, like the early
Mm,
stage
hmm.
of that back then, and like people could just kind of publish. Blogs were huge.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
which when I think about it is no different to like podcasts now, right? Except it's just a little different medium. But wow, I can't believe like I didn't know the Samrat connection and Hub because I remember reading
Huh.
Hub,
Yeah.
or at
It was a
least,
big deal
yeah, it was a
that
huge
time.
deal for
Yeah.
doing stuff. Uh, and I think that entire scene was so like tiny, right, at that time. Like
Yeah.
everyone would kind of knew everyone. And I think you being in Delhi kind of connected with you with certain people. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think like I know you must be tired of talking about all the kind of documentaries, but I want to kind of fast forward a bit to doing the listening room sessions, right?
Mm.
And I know about it thanks to my friend Bhanuj, who was kind of doing them in Bombay.
Yeah.
Uh, how did those come about, and what
Mm.
was the whole kind of philosophy or idea between finding artists that would perform at those, right? Because
Yeah.
those are very interesting formats when I think about it.
Yeah. So Reproduce as an agency began in 2013, April 2013. And like MC Cash was also on that roster. I just wanted to consolidate these things in terms of musical artistry that I found compelling. And I wanted to attempt to carve out a niche where I would book Indian musicians outside of India. And so I did. So 2013, 14, 15 with like Peter Cat and the Fafa and of course Charanjit and others. Hari also, Vel, this Danish Punjabi producer. I was kind of handling their bookings. I wasn't managing them. I mean, I've had these conversations where people assume that I managed Peter. I didn't. I basically played a role as a broker, um, out of goodwill, I guess, because I just thought and felt and maybe knew that this is all remarkable and something interesting is going to happen in just a matter of time. Um, so yeah, for the first 2 years of Reproduce as an entity, that's all I did. I focused on that, international bookings, and I didn't really touch India, but of course was still based in Delhi and would go to like at that time. Gosh, I'm trying to think. It would have been, maybe Hoska's Village. Um, although I don't, there was a whole scene, so to speak, happening there that I didn't, it was mostly DJs and it wasn't really my cup of tea. But I was keenly aware of like the spaces and how the financing, again, maybe it's the economist, I don't know, like how I think steps towards consolidation and deregulation in the alcohol sector in India was allowing more FDI and these brands just hungry for the, at that time, millennial um, thirst, as it were, and just basically throwing money at these venues that now had liquor licenses and, for them to stock their whatever Diageo or AB InBev brands and pay artists a guarantee of 20K, even if nobody comes. It was just some la la land. It was bizarre. Um, so on the one, I was observing all this and thinking that's amazing. And also a lot of my friends were playing, so it was fun. And also the booze was often free, because they were just, it's all marketing spends. But I also realized that with that is a danger that if you rely on F&B sector for musical curation, they're just going to pair margarita pizzas with milk toast music. And that's not, that's a bit harsh, but like, music that maybe is, let's just say, palatable and goes well with a virgin mojito or not. You know what I mean? Like these venues, it was great to like have these arenas now to showcase music and terribly exciting for many. And I will say a lot of my friends and peers and colleagues um, went through that. And I think kind of initially early stages of coming to grips with performing to a public. So that's a big deal. But yeah, the curation was skewed. And so I believe it was New Year's Day 2016. I Facebook messaged Banuj. I had just met Banuj last year because he had written a piece about the Jack Daniels Music Awards that I thought was brilliant. Like I just contacted him like, wow, well, I just really liked the piece and
The scammies, right?
yeah. So I read that article and I thought that was brilliant. And who is this guy? And so I think I just, maybe there's an email address, maybe it's Twitter. I don't remember how I contacted him exactly, but we did and we became friends anyway. So early stage in our relationship, but I don't know, I thought about him that New Year's Day for whatever reason. And we were basically whining and bitching about gigs. And I remember when I was like in Bombay in 2008, Nick Hill was represented and still is to this day by a gallery in South Bombay called Chatterjee and Lal, Mort Chatterjee and Tara. And I remember speaking to Mort then, again, like early, about doing gigs. And maybe it was the Blacklist time. I was like, can we do a show at your gallery? He was like, yeah, no, it's really small. I don't think it's gonna. But I was looking for alternative spaces to do shows. I just because, like, wouldn't that be cool kind of thing. So I think that, the conversation emerged again New Year's Day 2016. And then Banuj mentioned that through Falguni, I don't know if you know Falguni. Falguni knew a woman who ran a gallery in South Bombay called Latitude 29 or 23, I think. I don't know if it's still there. Sri Goswami was her name, I'm pretty sure. The gallerist, Bengali woman, if I'm not mistaken. And so he was like, yeah, we should hit them up. So I put that in the back of my head. And then I think around that time, maybe I had showcased, I think once or twice I had showcased Hari, this Danish guy, Danish Punjabi producer in India. I think it was my first attempt to bring an artist to India. It was actually, and he was on the label roster. And so for me, it was like, I was excited. And I booked him a few shows in India. And his music is admittedly a bit strange. Anyhow, I got this email from theobscurant@gmail.com. I didn't know who, and it's this guy Shubo. And Shubo was making music under the alias of Jessup and Co. And so he sent me this music. This is soon after, like Jan, maybe a bit, I don't know, around the same time. And I was like, this is crazy. What is this? Who are you? And I basically wanted to showcase him and Anupal, his At that time, it was a duo. And what they would do live, they didn't perform live. I was like, what would that be like? And so, yeah, and it was Bhanuj and I, like it was between this gallery in Bombay, Koj in Delhi, who are always, grateful for just them being supportive. And another place in Bangalore called Shunya, a dance studio. I think that Rahul Giri knew about RHL. We did 3 shows, and I did that as a way, honestly, I'm gonna say I because, at end of the day it was like spreadsheets and stuff. To bring Jesp and Co on a bit of a loop to perform in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, and home. And so that was the first, it was February 13th or 14th, 2016, and Delhi was the first one, and then Bombay, and then Bangalore. And I think Delhi was like Surikant and Samrat and these two. I think Bombay was Sanaya, these two, and somebody else. I remember Aditya Nandwana came to the show and his eyes were huge. And he was just like, what the Animal Factory. Anyway, in Bangalore was Giri, RHL, and but yeah, those are the first times we did those. We kind of did this. And it was like, I mean, I think these guys had to pay for their way to get back from Bangalore to Calcutta. So I wouldn't say it was it was successful, but it was also like, they shouldn't have paid. It should have paid for itself. But the reality of it is that it didn't. So they had to buy their own train ticket back home. Um, but maybe I shared the cost. I don't remember. It was a while ago. But the point is that it was the first time we did that. And it left a huge impact in my head. And then I just got honestly like stoked. And I think in March, started to put it out there. And so it began. And it was funny because it was the first time I was producing events in India and I was completely avoiding the F&B space and just more excited about, well, if I don't have to worry about that, then I can think about curation in a wildly different way. And just threw myself into SoundCloud in India, as it were, and looking for music that I found interesting. And not that I was surprised, but I found a lot. Oh, I also should say this was prefaced by somebody in the US asked me to make a mix, like a mix, like a 2 hour mix. And that was
Oh
actually the
shit.
first time. Yeah, this was 2015. It's out there somewhere. But that was my first real context of just like throwing myself into the internet and digging and finding all this music from India that I found interesting. So I came across Ruhail that way, Sister. Yeah, but before that was even before Sister. That he was in a band called Bonefucker. And actually that was like Karthik and Pillai from Peter Trendcrusher Singh. They were playing NH7 that December and I was with them because I was helping them with, bookings, I guess. And they played me Bonefucker. Anyway, so yeah, I was like suddenly found myself awash in remarkably interesting music from India. And was like, well, I have this idea. I think I have a working model to showcase them where I'm only accountable to the artists and they can do whatever the hell they want. So that's what we did. And it was ultimately a consequence of Banuj and I possibly hungover and bored on a New Year's Day, whining about gigs. And then just doing it and doing it a lot. And I would say quickly that the next year in particular, 2017, 18, then getting I mean, maybe it was like 2017. I don't know, but then having like people at social contact me and like commercial venues contacting me and me being a bit of a, I don't know, I don't know if it's pig-headed or just stubborn, but me kind of being like, no, thanks. But then ultimately doing it, but doing it like, in a way that I felt made sense but still predominantly just finding really cool places that were like I thought would be great to showcase music. And also to showcase music in a very particular way. I just kind of want to knock out the whole expectation of an evening thing where everybody's hammered and there's a gig, but you're outside smoking butts and no one gives a shit and you're just there to hang. That's fun. I've been that guy. But I don't know, the music that I found interesting, I didn't feel would suit that kind of deployment. It was just something a bit more where you just need to piece out and just listen. So we're go listening room. And also knock out the evening component and start at 4 o'clock on a Sunday and go till 9, you know? Because then it's not about getting hammered. It's just like a different take on it, you know? It's all conscious. Also, Sundays were like less competition event-wise. That was strategic, I suppose. Um, yeah. And I think like we just suddenly started getting a lot of enthusiastic patrons and support, and we started getting music sent to us, you know, from people who read the room, so to speak, and maybe were like, I think these guys might get what I do. Yeah. And then finding people like Shomdev, who was in Delhi, and then him taking on production in Delhi when I was away, and Calcutta. I mean, just people started, you know, Hemant in Bangalore, Vanuj in Bombay. People, kind of a core group of people, Roy, Debankar, and Chennai, people who would who were leading production in different cities, and yeah, and just doing a lot. So yeah, but they were. I mean, they remain. I mean, I I haven't been doing as many lately. I really should like. I really should. I don't have a. I'm so involved in like film right now, which is I don't know. I mean, at the same time, this whole thing started from that desire to tell stories. I think the events were just a way to, well, many things. On the one hand, yeah, simple desire to want to see music in a live context in a way that I liked, but also I think to kind of similarly dig in, like who are these people? You know, who are these people who are taking these wild risks sonically? Like who does that? And why? And what's your story? Where did that come from? Perhaps a lot of it informed by just a kind of stubborn, lingering interest in the story of the Indian economy and just how society changes when the numbers change. But yeah, um, like just really indulgently, perhaps wildly creative spaces. Also, for me to think about event production and doing away with like stages and also curation, like thinking about juxtaposition. I mean, it was yeah. I mean, it was just an aesthetic um, carnival of sorts for me to kind of think about the possibilities of how to showcase music in a way that I found interesting.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to avoid the Peter Cat question that I had because I think that'll take us in a completely different direction.
Hmm.
But we should definitely touch base on that another time.
Mm.
But what I want to kind of looking back, right? Because there was a time, like you said, they were so regular. There was Sundays. Uh,
Yeah,
I didn't realize that this was all like very deliberate. Uh,
yeah.
if I'm gonna really kind of push you to it, right, and at least speak about as many artists, was there like a certain artist you curated or booked where it just completely blew your mind and you were like, "What the fuck?" Like this is
Yeah.
something like I didn't expect because you were all, like you said, right? You were taking bets and you were trying to like
This is
figure
like
out the
this is like first time like people performing for the first time in their life, at like 18 or 20 or whatever it was. They didn't even know what they were gonna do. I just heard something on SoundCloud. I was like, oh well. Um, there is an answer that comes to mind immediately, and that would be Rohel Kaiser. There's others, but I do remember it was like I think the third event that we did. Because I remember when I first started thinking about these events, I immediately messaged Ruhail, like, who are you? Like, what, you know? And then after we did the first run in February, I messaged him saying, hey, listen, would you like to perform? And if so, what would you need from me? Nothing, crickets for 2 weeks. And then I get a message back saying, I have an iPod. I'd like a floor tom, a microphone, and a projector. I was like, okay. So you know, did that. And it was this like geometric staircase leading into an architect studio in uh Hozka's Enclave. Um this kind of space, like a natural, I wouldn't say amphitheater, but it was like this. You could sit on the staircase and it lands on a flat, like, you know, the ground floor. And so he set up there and it was like he was so deliberate. It was so crystalline. It was so it was him, the floor tom. He he had these loops. It was insane. I think everybody in that room was just like, what the like what's going? I mean, I think he showed. Did he show Pig? No, he showed Begotten. If you know that film. Anyway, yeah, I'd never seen the film before. It was just like, what's going on? So yeah, but there's so many. Like, I mean, I think I remember hearing Udbhav's music for the first time, Nanku Sharma, as he goes by now, just Nanku, on SoundCloud, and being like, what is that? And then asking him if he would be interested. And he was like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, oh, don't worry, whatever. You can just play music off of like your laptop if you really. So he did, and um, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot. Um, yeah, Jessica Co. a few times. I guess this events where clearly whoever was present was like, like really, you can't make that up. You can't forge that kind of reaction. And if I was fortunate enough to be present, being part of that, yeah, but yeah, but it was also, as I mentioned earlier, it was also a desire to juxtapose like a Ruhail with then like a something totally different, like completely different. Maybe an MC Core, I don't, let's say, who's great, really talented rapper, but not like, it doesn't sound like Ruhail, let's say. But then to think about the space as a place, okay, so there's that, and then a different part of the structure right afterward, right afterwards, without any kind of changeover. I hate that shit. Like that was also the thing. I really find changeovers tedious, and everybody's like waiting for the next band or whatever. I did away with all that with sound checks, and then when we start, it's just one after the other. So right after like something like a Rohil, there's like an MC core in a different part of this structure. And you don't really have time to kind of process what's going on. You just follow this music and then it happens. It was all conscious. And it was all like a production, um, I don't know, model aspiration to kind of showcase music in a way where, in my view, perhaps naively, that if you think about the aesthetic deployment and the production aspect of it in this way, it may linger in people's minds more as patrons. And I think also around that same time, I started an Instagram page at the behest of my friend. Well, he doesn't. I don't know if he wants me to talk about it, but anyway, I had a friend of mine who basically was like, "You're a fucking idiot. Why don't you have an Instagram page? Like, you're stupid." So I started one. And I think at the time, Instagram only allowed one by one aspect video to a maximum of 15 seconds. So I started cutting this at that point growing archive of footage of people that I were on the roster in these 15-second mini stories, which kind of look like reels now, but at the time they were just these indulgent exercises in editing for me. Um, and so between like thinking about the nature of production and the events and how they felt, and then also these short videos that basically became ads for the events. Like if I had an event, I would make a short video and just had a lot of fun and, deployed a certain sense of humor or whatever, some sort of consideration to what I was doing. I think the whole thing just became this exercise in, um, it's going to sound corporate, brand recognition, but like a brand that nobody knows what it is, But it's just a thing. It's out there. And I would have these conversations with people, be it in Delhi. I remember I'd be somewhere and somebody would like, oh, hey, this is Rana. He steers this thing called Reproduce. And then it would often happen. People are like, oh, wait, are those videos with the square? Like, is that what the hell is that? You know? Like people were seeing these things, but they didn't really know what the hell it was, which was perfect in my view. It was just like, so yeah, it was kind of like um a sort of exercise in developing a brand that meant nothing but everything to the right person, if that makes sense. And a lot of that was, of course, the events, and then that extending to people finding each other at the events. like-minded people or otherwise, or new collaborations happen between artists who otherwise wouldn't know each other or meet. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's something I remain very proud of, I'll say. That is really cool. I'm talking about it past tense. It's still I think we've been kind of doing it a lot in Goa because like I have a production lead there and I have yeah, it's what I can afford to do, not financially, just time-wise right now. I really should. I'm an idiot. What I should, and I get like DMs from people who want to volunteer with me, but I just find the whole intern thing a bit of a scam, and I've always been really like, unless I'm paying you, I don't know. But I should get past that. And like, there's like 20 something, young 20 something people who are enthusiastic and really like what we do. Maybe I'm just not thinking about this carefully. Anyway, but yeah, the events. What was that? It was basically a vehicle to showcase music that I found interesting in a way that I found engaging, uh, with an intended outcome of like developing some sort of a community is an overused term, but something that people could then find themselves around, let's say.
Wow, that's so interesting, right? And I think you've compressed like years of events down so like short. But
Yeah.
I highly encourage everyone to kind of check out. I'm sure there's like archives and some kind of like footage someone has uploaded of different
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, there was this Netflix thing that ran for 3 years. I should ask those guys if I could just put that online because it's cool. It's like all that footage in like a 30-minute, 25-minute episode. I should
Okay,
talk to those guys. Anyway, but yeah.
nice.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, Rana, we've talked a lot, but what I'm also very curious about is what you're currently listening to. And please feel free to give a shout out to any new artists also that have currently been blowing your mind.
Hmm. So, um, I've been listening to a lot of like tilted gospel, sort of. There's this guy, he's a reverend. I think he was in Baltimore or Detroit. His name is Otis G. Johnson. He put out a record on it's like a private press record from '78 called God is Love. And it's him and like a drum machine and sounds like some sort of not a church organ, but like some sort of keyboard. And he's just kind of like talking about not talking, singing about his faith. But it's like there's all these bum notes and he kind of goes off key, but it's incredible. And then through that, I kind of found this whole genre of music that's like this weird meeting point of like faith-based music, gospel music, and funk, soul, sort of. Mostly in the northeast of the US in the early 70s, early mid 70s. So that has been taking up a lot of my ears. Um, you know, it's like devotional music, but it's like, I don't know, kind of a bit bent. Um, oh, I think I listen to Bathory once a day, if I'm editing. Um, Let me think. What else have I listened to recently? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that stuff kind of takes up a lot of my time. Oh, the new Mogwai record. I was happily like surprised about. I kind of forgot about Mogwai, but the last two records are outstanding. I go on these long walks now. Usually in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'll walk for like, I don't know, 8, 9 kilometers, and I'll just listen to a record over the course of an hour, and it's been great. I haven't done that in so long, so I don't have streaming what do you like services. I I have MP3s on my phone, on my iPhone. Still, it's maybe a layover from having an iPod for many years. But so yeah, I'll just like get a record, put it on my phone, and just walk around with it. But lately that's been Mogwai. A band called Flying Saucer Attack. I don't know. They're like this Bristol band, extremely very melodic. It's kind of like Nick Drake in a wind tunnel. I think that would be the most apt description. Kind of English pastoral folk, but like all through walls of screaming distortion and feedback. Um, yeah. Uh, can't think of anything else that's kind of really stuck out apart from Otis, who's been a bit of a mainstay in my life recently. Hmm.
Awesome. So lots of new music for metalheads and non-metalheads
Uh,
like to kind of check out. But it's interesting that you mentioned Mogwai, right? Because today I
yeah.
got an email because I'm subscribed to their newsletter. Is
Uh,
they're doing a world tour, and when you read world tour, the first thing that occurs to you is that are they heading this side of the world? But
right.
unfortunately, it's like Europe itself. I'm just actually looking at the dates. Yeah, in
They're
September.
yeah, they're playing in Europe. I saw that because I'm going to Europe myself very soon, and I'm tempted. They're playing in I think it was Dublin or somewhere where it's not so. Oh, The Hague, where I actually could potentially go. But I remember they came to India for 87. That same 87 when Peter
Yeah,
Cat played in 2015. I remember. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, right? I think it was them, and there was an entire time or a couple of years where I went through this entire post-rock phase.
Mm.
And there's a guy in India actually who does a page. It started, I think, as a blog and then a YouTube page where post-rock dwells.
Yeah. That rings a bell. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's Pune based. I've met him a couple of times. And then I'd actually and I managed to kind of interview a couple of post-rock bands a couple of years, yeah, last year and stuff. And it's interesting just to see how, like, while there are trends, really, these guys still kind of have
Yeah.
transcended all of that. So I
Yeah.
think that was quite interesting. But at the start of our conversation, you were talking about, watching a lot of the footage and kind of remastering it. And you're
Yeah.
actually heading to Europe in a few days. Do you want to share what you're up to? And I don't know if anyone's in Europe, maybe they could follow you and check out what you're going to be up to.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So I'm here in Canada, as I mentioned. I'm just head down cutting. I have so much I've shot over the past 2 years, and I kind of wanted just to take advantage, so to speak, of being here in the Canadian summer, um, just to work, quietly. And I have been. And then I got this in May or June. Somebody, friend of mine, asked me if I wanted to come to Switzerland for this kind of conference of sorts. Um, which was it's like a he kind of described it as it's like academics and scientists and creative people meeting in a resort and talking about it. Like not the resort, but just like, the state of play. And it sounded, to be very frank, it sounded a bit pretentious. I mean, like, I don't know, dude. Like, why do you want me to come? And he was like, well, you're just a, creative individual who has an interesting take on the world. I think it'd be great. So anyway, I was like, I don't know, man. But then I thought about it. I was like, okay, I should go. And so then I decided to go. But I'm working on this film right now. I mean, it's now there's already a second cut. But I shot some more of it just now when I was in India in June, very quick. Well, when I met you, actually, when I was in India. I went back to Bengal. It's on this gentleman named Kobir. Ali Sheikh is his name. He goes by DJ Kobir, and he is a pioneer of a form called Dek Bass from West Bengal, which is really apocalyptic, aggressive form of bass music, just low end, like obliteration. With you may or may not have seen these reels, some of which have gone quite viral, of these like three-story stacks of subwoofers and fields in Bengal, just like blowing people to pieces. Anyway, yeah, the film about that. So I'm, editing it, and then I realized, oh, I should show this film. And so I decided, well, since I'm going to Europe, I wonder if I can set up some screenings. So what began as a desire to show Bass Boss, which is the name of the film, to some people for my own kind of like just to see what people thought about it. Um, I then realized baseball as it stands is 17 minutes. So a 17-minute screening with a Q&A. It's not much event-wise. So maybe I should show a few of the films. So what's happening are these kind of mini retrospectives of like 4 to 5 of my films. So the first one's in Berlin, this really cute theater, August 12th. Um, I'm lining up some stuff in Spain, maybe Brussels, maybe Amsterdam, Copenhagen. Trying. Let's see. At this point, like I'm not. I just want to see how it goes. And I think with the intention of then maybe thinking about something a bit bigger next year. But yeah, that I'll be in Europe for like a month, kind of booting around, uh, showing some films, going to a kind of a conference of sort in Switzerland, and yeah. But basically that I've just been really head down on thinking about this current project, Bass Boss, and what to do with it. And that's probably also I want to start showing it just at this stage to see and plant some seeds, so to speak, in people's minds about what this is and what it could be. But have an inkling to go back and shoot something similar in another part of India. Because this whole thing, like, I've been following this what do I call it? These deployments of massive subwoofers on vehicles. I'm sounding very clinical about this, but basically these kind of setups across India that have been happening for a long time, to be sure. But something's happened over the past 5, 6 years where the BPMs are like 150. Um, a lot of it goes super hard. That's always been there. You know, the auto-tune kind of gabber variety of music, and be it UP or Maharashtra. I mean, but they're all it's all different. You know, like Maharashtra has the whole Ganpati kind of linkage, and then UP has often the more kind of like Hindu extremist linkage. Bengal is just kind of like just sonic absurdity. But you know, it's also happening in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. So I think it's like in speaking to people now who have seen the film, trailers on Instagram. So I've had the good fortune of interacting with people just because of Instagram. Um, I think I don't want to say consensus, but there's a sense that like certainly that this form and this kind of broader um engineering feat, because you know putting on these events, it's like it's ephemera. It's not like a venue. It's like a field or like a road or something, you know. But the commitment and the variety of this music, and and maybe the fact that the people making this music have Instagram to you know shoot reels about what they're doing, has just kind of allowed this form to spread very quickly, and it's entirely unique to me. And if it wasn't for the fact that I'm drawn to high BPMs, I might think it's awful to listen to, but I some of it just goes hard, like super hard, you know? So I have a feeling I'll be like digging in some more. In many ways, it's like a natural continuation of Reproduce. It's like it is all still Reproduce. It's just Reproduce as like a film entity, but like yeah, like these guys are just making music that to an outsider sounds like just hell on earth, but it will command thousands of people in a field in, you know, Purba Mednipur and the district, or you know, in Bengal or Nadia district or whatever. So fascinating. It remains though. It remains like who is Kabir? What the hell is going on? You know, that still is at the core of all this. Like these people who take risks, who take wild risks because they are compelled to, and I remain fascinated as to why and where that compulsion comes from. So, yeah, that's what's up.
I mean, if I have to kind of do like a complete full circle, right? It goes back to Isaac Hayes and why is he kind of
Yeah, it does. It
standing
does.
like that and what's he doing? I think you're still kind of
Yeah,
answering those kind of questions
yeah,
still.
yeah, yeah. I think it just so happens now that I use cameras, whereas before maybe
Hmm.
like, you know. But yeah, I have a toolkit. So,
Yeah.
and it's been cool, man. Like it's been an interesting few years. Like I've had some really yeah, like I'd say they're commercial projects, but like they're commercial projects that are premised on the way that I cut video. And what I mean by that is yeah, I'm stubborn and for better or for worse. I think I kind of wanted to, over the years with Reproduce, explore, and also explore myself as a creative individual, let's say. My toolkit being cameras and editing video. Also event production and curation, sure. But yeah, like finding others who appreciate the visual language that I have. But that's all because of Reproduce. It really is. I mean, so yeah, no, it's I don't know, it's an interesting time, I'll say. I think I'm finally now. It's been like this for the past 3 years, but like year by year, just being afforded opportunities to do things with my cameras that, and also as an editor, I use cameras more because I have to. Like I like to use cameras. I certainly can geek out on 1.4 lenses, but it's the edit, it's the cut, and feel like I'll be cutting a lot, maybe for the rest of my life. I don't know. Which isn't a bad thing. Yeah,
Awesome, man. I wish you all the best and definitely looking forward to watching. And I must say, right, thanks for actually sharing a screening of Bass Boss.
yeah, yeah. You can. We'll do more. So if your viewers are interested, it's Reproduce Artists on Instagram at Reproduce Artists, and whatever events that we do, I put stuff up there, and suspect I'll be back in India in the winter in January. Um, so yeah, maybe see some of you guys out there.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks so much. And
Yeah,
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 definitely gonna leave a link to everything in the show notes as always.
right on, man. Hey, thanks. I appreciate it. It was fun.